counsel. Ms. Arias, you are still under oath. Do you understand?
Yes.
Mr. Nermy, you may continue with redirect.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Jodi.
Good morning.
Judge. Ms. Arias, last week when you spoke with counsel for the state, you were shown Exhibit 456. Showing that to you now. Do you remember seeing that?
Yes.
Journal entry? Okay. To your recollection, was that the only journal entry you made on January 24th, 2008?
No, it was not.
Hand you what's been marked as Exhibit 511. Could you please read that over for us?
Okay.
Okay. Drawing your attention back to Exhibit 456, it appears that you place your initials and then there is a line underneath the paragraph. Is that what you would do to end a particular entry?
Usually, yes.
Okay. You say usually the Exhibit 511 I just showed you, the writings that follow on January 24th, was that a separate entry?
Yes.
Okay. But was it a continuation of the thoughts and ideas that you were dealing with on January 24th of 2008?
Yes.
And in that regard, do the highlighted portions hold any significance as it relates to your thoughts about what you may have seen days prior?
Yes.
And you authored this on January 24th, 2008, all these entries, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to move to admit Exhibit 511.
Objection. Lack of foundation as to the timing, and if I may word dire, as to the timing of these entries.
Your Honor, we would object. May we approach?
Well, I'll give you an opportunity to follow up on that issue with regard to timing, and then you may approach.
Ma'am, with regard to this entry here, or exhibit number 511, there is an indication, you said that the Thursday entry of January 24th of 2008, that's the end of that entry, correct?
Yes.
There is no date for the next entry, is there?
No.
And then, however, at the very top, we have another entry that says Thursday, 1/24/2008, right?
Yes.
And with regard to this particular entry, that's Thursday, 1/24/2008, how much time elapsed between the first entry was made and the second entry was made?
It was probably just enough time for me to listen to that audiobook and record that excerpt from the audiobook.
So you were listening to something, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
With regard to this second entry of January 24th of 2008, is that the complete second entry? Or is there more missing, since I don't see your initials on this one?
I believe it's the complete entry.
You believe what?
It's the complete entry.
Why don't we have you take a look at it just to make
Okay.
sure? Okay. This is exhibit number 242.002. Take a look at it.
Yes.
All right. So how much time are we talking about between the first Thursday, January 24, 2008 entry and the second Thursday, January 24, 2008 entry?
It would have been a matter of hours, but I don't know exactly how many hours.
I don't have any objection.
Okay, Jodi, I'm going to draw your attention. Now, looking at, before we go into Exhibit 511, looking at Exhibit 456, the portion previously admitted of the January 24th, 2008 minute entry, it says there's been nothing noteworthy to report. You see that?
Yes.
And you were questioned last week because you had told us that on the 21st or 22nd of January 2008 is when you saw Mr. Alexander masturbating to an image of a child. Remember that?
Yes, the 21st.
Okay. And before we get into the entry, you had said, you were asked several times, well, why would you say nothing's noteworthy to report? And you said that wouldn't be the type of thing I would write in my journal. Can you explain that to us now?
Well, to me, as far as noteworthy things you would want to note, and that's exactly the opposite of something I would want to note. I wouldn't want to remember that. I wouldn't want it recorded in my journal as far as record keeping goes. And also, it's a highly negative event, and it was a negative experience for me, and it's not something that I wished to remember.
Okay. And now, before we move past discussion of this event, one of the things you were asked about is what time you saw, what time of day it was that you saw Mr. Alexander masturbating to this image. Do you recall being asked that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you saw that event, you witnessed what you described for us, did you think to yourself, I better check my watch, I might need to testify about this 5 years later?
No.
It was a startling event, was it not?
Yeah, it was very shocking.
Drawing your attention back to Exhibit 511. And specifically, try to make it visible for you there. I guess we can't get it all in. You see there that you're speaking about Travis.
Yes.
2 or 3 days later, after this event. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. You mentioned that you love him. Love him.
Yes.
Is that an accurate of your feelings for him at that point in time?
Yes, it was.
You say that you're saying that he displays a massive amount of unconditional love for you?
Yes.
And you felt that way at the time?
I did.
You say in this entry, I'm almost haunted by it. What does that mean?
It means the light in the dark, because that was a few days following a really couple of dark events, and he makes up for it in really amazing ways, and that part just stays with me, and it's hard I couldn't get that out of my mind or my heart, just how tender he is and how much more he displays his love when he goes out of his way to make up for whatever he did.
So when you say you're haunted by it, are you saying you're haunted by what you saw on the 21st or 22nd, or are you haunted by his love? I'm a little confused.
There's a lack of foundation as to which day. On the 22nd, she claims he hit her. On the 21st, she claims something else.
Sustained.
At this time period, you say you're haunted by it. What is it?
It's more the conflicting desire that I had I wanted to stay with him, but I also knew that would be a really bad idea. So it was more just like I'm haunted by the love that he expresses toward me that keeps me, well, I stayed with him out of my own free will, but it felt like it kept me hooked. Even though he wasn't like forcing me to stay with him or anything, I felt like I wanted to continue being with him when he acted that way, but he wasn't always that way.
You mentioned in the next sentence, well, why don't you read the next sentence for us? It begins with but.
But it still remains that I cannot marry him. I can't quite put my finger on it, but something is just off with that boy. We've all got head problems, that's for sure, but there are...
Well, we went 2 sentences here, so let's back up.
I'm sorry.
To the first sentence, you say this is in January 4th of 2008, you've come to the conclusion that you could not marry Travis. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Was the subject of marriage previous to January 24th, was that something that you and Travis were discussing?
Yes, we've discussed it prior to that date.
And had he ever proposed to you?
Yeah, he did over the phone once.
Did you receive that proposal as being serious or just a joke?
There were times when he said it jokingly, but that one over the phone, I believed he was serious.
And did that one over the phone, did that occur before this journal entry on the 24th? If you recall.
Yes, that was the day we broke up.
Okay. Now you said, reading on in that sentence, you can't quite put your finger on it, but something is off with that boy. That boy being Travis, right?
Yes.
Okay. What did you mean by that when you wrote that in your journal?
Well, that's kind of my indirect way of referring to his issues that were, in my mind, something I couldn't look past and accept.
Okay. Looking at that last sentence again that begins with "but," there are certain things that will never sit right with, is that me?
Yes.
And are we referring to that same incident in January? Things
Yes.
that didn't sit right with you?
Yes, both incidents.
The next sentence there, he talks, could you read that for us, beginning with "for example"?
For example, he always makes that ridiculous joke. Families can be forever. Why do you want to spend so much time with them now?
And you say that you want a family man who takes family seriously. Are you referring back to the idea of reasons why you wouldn't marry Travis in those sentences? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, just
Restate your question. Sustain.
What are we referencing in those two sentences?
well, directly I'm referencing a joke that he used to make, and I left out together. It should be families can be together forever. That's how the saying goes in the church. And but he would add that second part to the sentence. And he made that joke several times right before this date because I went to see my family in Wairika for Christmas. So it just, even though he joked, it kind of reminded me that he wasn't really a family kind of guy, I didn't think. And especially after the previous few days, I worried about what, I guess it just sort of eliminated in my mind any possibility of having children with him because I would be worried, about my children.
Now you're still in the next sentence there. Could you read that? But he has told me.
But he has told me time and again that if he could marry me, it would mean he won the wife lottery.
So when we're talking about this entire paragraph and what we saw before, the stream of consciousness seems to be the issue of marriage. Is that accurate?
That's accurate, yes.
And so this comment about winning the wife lottery with you, is that something Travis made once or made many times?
He told me that on several occasions.
And you found that, from what we see here, it seems like you found that to be sweet.
I took it as a very high compliment.
And you say here that you want to be married on January 24th of 2007. Was that, for lack of a better way of putting it, was that a goal in your life?
At that time, that was a goal in my life.
There's a sentence there says, "I certainly." Did you see that?
Um,
Begins with "I certainly."
I'm looking for, oh yeah.
Could you read that sentence for us?
I certainly wasn't thrilled, no. I was devastated when I discovered that he wasn't being faithful to me.
In that sentence, you say faithful. What are we talking about by faithful?
Just being monogamous within our relationship.
So on January 24th of 2007, you knew that he wasn't monogamous within your relationship, correct?
Yes, because the year before is when I had discovered that.
But you kept going with the friendship, correct?
Yeah, the friendship.
And you
I
went
guess.
along with the sexual activities as well, right?
Yes.
Okay. So this is something you had a long-standing knowledge of before June 4th of 2008, isn't that correct?
Yes.
Drawing your attention to what appears to be the final highlighted page. Let's read that over and tell us, what is that a reference to?
I was comparing my two previous experiences of being cheated on with my experience of being cheated on with Travis and how they were different.
And you talk about ripping out the last few pages, but you refrained from doing that. I just want to make sure, ripping out the last few pages, is that a metaphor, or are we actually talking about ripping pages out of the journal?
Kind of both. I was referring to literally doing it, but by doing that, it would kind of symbolize wanting to erase that day or that whatever, that kind of thing, whatever I'd written about, but I didn't.
That day referring to what you just wrote on the 24th.
No, more referring to the negative things I had just written about, but those are indirectly referring to those 2 days prior, the 21st and 22nd.
Okay. So rather than making notes about time and location, your goal was to try to forget what you had seen.
Objection made.
Sustained.
Now, Ms. Arias, I want to draw your attention to Exhibit 471. This was a entry from your journal on March 2nd. Do you remember seeing that?
Yes.
Now showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 512 and also handing you Exhibit 471. You take a look at both of these and discern for us whether Exhibit 471 is the entirety of your journal entries from March 2nd, 2008.
It looks like the entirety of that entry, but there's another one on the same day.
In which exhibit contains that entry in the same day?
512.
Okay. And as it relates to 512, that entry that is contained in 511 that is not in 470, is that right?
Or 71.
471. Is that a continuation of the thoughts you were having on March 2nd of 2008?
Yes, it's along the same theme.
Okay. And you mentioned separate entries. Like with the last entry, was there a period of time which you stopped your writing?
There might have been, if that's why I started to date it again, but not much because it was all on the same day.
Okay. So you don't recall how long it was between these two journal entries?
Since it's a Sunday, it likely would have been 3 hours because usually I journaled before church and after, and sometimes during.
Okay. And you just told us you were dealing with some of those same issues that you were dealing with earlier in your journal on 3.2. Referencing the highlighted portion, does that illustrate the issues you were going through, not previously noted on 3/2/2008?
Yes.
I move to admit Exhibit 512.
No objection.
512 is admitted.
Before we talk further about the entry on Sunday, March 2nd, 2008, do you remember what was going on that day?
More the day before that, on Saturday, but yeah, Sunday.
Okay, well, what was going on that Saturday before that?
That's the day we were going to drive to the tax seminar in Tempe, and we ended up not going because of the fight that we got into.
Okay. Now, looking at the portion of your journal entries that we didn't see in the previous exhibit 471, we see March 2nd, 2008, and now as you said earlier, that's the day you wrote that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. If you could be so kind as to read the first sentence of the highlighted portion.
I wish I could turn back the clock and make some different decisions.
What do you mean turning back the clock and making different decisions?
Well, if I could go back in time, I would choose differently with regard to Travis, of course. And when I start thinking along those lines, I think back further, well, maybe I would have never gone to the MGM Grand, or maybe I would have never gotten involved with prepaid legal, or maybe I would have never picked up that DVD and looked at it, or, just different things going back. Like at any point in time, I could have made a different decision, and we'd all be in different places today.
You say that you had some anxiety about moving. See that sentence there?
Yes.
On March 2nd, 2008, what was your anxiety about moving?
Well, I was a little concerned about separating from Travis, not because, well, I knew we needed space apart, but I was just worried that it wouldn't be a smooth separation, and I was concerned about sort of leaving him to his own vices, so to speak.
What do you mean by vices?
Just letting him, well, he's free to do what he wants, but I guess I was worried about, I felt at this point in time that I was kind of starting to urge him to pick up the phone and call somebody for help. But he wasn't really budging on that. He wasn't doing it. So I was worried that if I just left town that he would never do it. But I didn't want to push him, but I wanted him to do it. So, but it's his life, at the same time. So it was hard. It was a difficult decision. I knew that by leaving, I don't want to say checking up on him, but I wouldn't be able to, I don't know. I wanted him to make progress with that, in that regard, with his issues, and I wanted to make sure that he went down that path so that he wouldn't go down an even worse path, things that he didn't want to do, ultimately.
Is part of what you're saying with not wanting to say it that you weren't going to be available for him to have sex with?
Objection, characterization in not wanting to say it. She can say whatever she wants. She can say what she wants.
Stay disgraced.
Part of your anxiety was that you wouldn't be available for Mr. Alexander to have sex with?
Objection made.
Overruled.
That involved that, yes.
You say you will need to remember to breathe deeply and flow. What do you mean there?
Well, I felt I was making the right decision by moving back, even if it was difficult, and I just needed to remember that. That's what I meant by that.
Okay. Now, Ms. Arias, I want to ask you a couple things before we move past the writings, the text messages, the journals, what have you. There were a couple things that came up in these things on your cross-examination. One of them was the fact that you used the term, you referenced Mr. Alexander as hottie biscotti, and you also used that same term referencing Ryan Burns. Could you explain perhaps your use of that term to us?
Yes. When Juan said pet name, I was thinking T-Dog. That's why I answered yes. It wasn't a pet name that I gave him, but it's one I adopted that he had had prior to meeting him. So Hottie Biscotti is actually something that developed when I worked at Ventana Inn and Spa. I worked with a guy named Scott, and he and Daryl and I and everyone there, we were all friends, and we called him Scotty, and we also served espresso, and with the espresso were biscottis. So one day we figured out that it rhymed, so we started saying Scotty and biscotti, and it went with Hottie, and it just went on and on with all these little things that rhymed with that. So Hottie Biscotti stuck, and it's just a name that I would throw out. I've called my brothers that, I've called Daryl that, I've called a lot of people that. So it's not special to me, it's just a saying.
Okay. So it wasn't something you reserved for men that you had some sort of romantic interest in, is that fair to say?
Ask and answer.
Overruled.
That's correct.
You also mentioned talking about Travis and this nickname T-Dog. That was Travis's nickname?
Yes.
Okay. And if you could speak up, please.
Sorry. Yes, that was his nickname.
Okay. Was that the way your answer, that wasn't a nickname you gave him, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. You don't know if there was any particular reference or what that meant, if at all, if it had any meaning?
There were different ideas thrown out, but I really don't know the specific meaning behind that nickname.
But when you refer to him in that way, was it in an endearing manner?
It was, yes.
Okay. Now we also heard during your cross-examination about Travis's grandmother and how you had sent some roses to her after his death. Do you recall talking about that with Mr. Martinez?
Yes. No, they were irises.
Irises, I'm sorry.
Yes.
And why, my question to you is why you chose his grandmother to send these flowers to.
She's the only member of his family that I'd ever met. And her information, her phone number was given out to a lot of people to contact her, and I felt like by not doing anything or reaching out that would have been even worse than I felt really awful, and I felt like by not doing anything it would have been worse than sending flowers.
Well, let me back up to my question. Did you have knowledge of how important Travis's grandmother was to him?
Yes.
And did you learn that through Travis?
Yes.
And from your testimony, we heard is that you had met her. Well, let me ask you this. How many times had you met Travis's grandmother?
I want to say 3 times, but I went to the house 4.
You say you went to the house 4. Was there an occasion when you went to the house and she wasn't there? Or describe why you mean you didn't meet her that occasion.
There was one occasion after I moved out to Arizona. I believe it was in the fall, 2007.
Objection, you have a scope of cross-examination.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a 5-minute recess. Please go back to the jury room. We will call you back in approximately 5 minutes. Please remember the admonition.
Please stand for the jury.
The record will show the jury has left the courtroom. You may be seated. Ms. Arias, you may step down and speak with your attorneys. We are at recess for 5 minutes. be seated. Ms. Arias, please take the stand.
Please stand for the jury.
Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. Mr. Nerman, you may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just briefly, when we left off, you knew prior to June 4th that Travis's grandmother was very, very important to him. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Before we talk about the trip you took on June 2nd of 2008, you had told, or it had been raised during cross-examination about the violent incidents both between you and Mr. Alexander, but also just Mr. Alexander himself. You recall recounting for us the incident when he was banging his head against the wall in his
Yes.
home.
Yes.
Okay. You also mention of the fact that Mr. Alexander had hit your car. You recall saying that in cross-examination?
Yes.
Okay. Could you explain to us the events and circumstances surrounding Mr. Alexander hitting your car?
Yes. It was I think it was in May 2007, and we had spent 2 days at Disneyland, and we were driving to the Getty Center in Los Angeles because it was on the list. And from Anaheim to Los Angeles, distance-wise, it's not very far, but it took us a few hours to get there because there was gridlock, 5 or 6 lanes of traffic. We were barely moving, and he was driving my car, and he has zero tolerance for traffic jams. So he got very angry and began to swear and started banging the steering wheel with his fist and hitting the inside of the door, just screaming at other drivers who were oblivious to him, but he was screaming at them and just angry. I mean, it was like he was straining at the leash, but it was a seatbelt, like he couldn't restrain himself. That's what it was.
Did that incident scare you?
I can't say that I felt too scared, but I was really shocked because that was the angriest I'd ever seen him up to that point.
And remind us again, when did that occur?
I believe it was in May 2007.
Okay. We heard about this incident where he was banging his head, and we heard about the incident related to the car. Were there any other instances of violence that you witnessed that weren't against you?
Oh, I can't think of any specifically.
Okay. When we talk about violence against you, you told us earlier that he had sex with you or began having penile vaginal intercourse with you when you were asleep. Remember telling us that yesterday?
Yes.
And I believe you characterized that for us yesterday as a mistake. Is that right? You thought it could have been a mistake?
Yes.
When he grabbed your arm and bent you over the desk on June 4th, 2008, and had sex with you, did you view that as a mistake?
No.
How did you view that?
It was just, by then we were engaging in all kinds of activities without any boundaries, and so it was just something he wanted to do and something I was fine with. Like I said, it was a way for him to relieve his anger.
It was a way for what?
For him to relieve his anger.
You were fine with it because it was an alternative to violence?
Objection meeting.
Is that what you're telling us? Are you telling us that this was an alternative to anger?
Yes, to it escalating.
Okay. Escalating to violence?
Objection meeting.
Possibly, but anything that's, he already threw this CD, so I didn't want it to get any worse.
Okay. In late May 2008, you were asked about a robbery that occurred at your grandparents' home. Do you recall being asked about that?
Yes.
And you're aware that a handgun was one of the items stolen from your grandparents' house, right?
I became aware of that, yes.
And you really ultimately became aware of that in late May of 2008 after the robbery, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. At that point in time, would you have had, late May of 2008, if you wanted access to other guns, would you have had access to other guns?
Yes.
How so?
Well, short of buying one, Matt had guns, Daryl had a gun, my father had guns, and Matt had unregistered guns at the time, which is a big no-no in California. You're supposed to register your handguns. So he had some of those, and my dad had more guns than I was aware of at that time, but I knew of 2 9mm that he had, one which had a silencer that he kept by his chair in his office for when he's hooked up to his dialysis machine, he keeps one of those because he's in a vulnerable position. And also he keeps one in his bedroom. I believe it was in, like there's shelving right next to the bed. It was either in that cabinet or under the mattress or something like that. So he had those. I don't believe either of those were registered either. So by not registering those, I believe they're less traceable.
Okay. Several guns at your disposal if you wish them to be. Is that right?
That's right. I don't know that I could have gotten a hold of Daryl's gun, but I knew where it was.
We also talked about your choice to rent a car in Redding, California, as opposed to Wairika, correct?
Yes.
Okay. As it relates to Wairika, one of the things that was queried of you is the idea that it was a small town and people would know your business if you rented a car there. Do you remember that line of questioning?
Yes, I do.
Okay. How long, prior to your moving back in April of 2008, how long had you been away from Wairika?
Besides going back occasionally for visits, 10 years.
Then referencing May of 2008, did you know a lot of people in that town in May of 2008? Besides your family?
I didn't recognize anyone. I thought I would see more people that I knew because I lived there, but I actually didn't see almost any of my friends there anymore.
Okay. Now, referencing the same time period, May of, or June, early June, excuse me, of 2008, you owned an automobile, right? This Infiniti that we've talked about?
Yes.
Okay. And being in Wairika, you had family members there as well who had vehicles. Is that accurate?
Yes.
You could have borrowed a car from your parents?
Yes, my parents have lots of cars.
Could have borrowed a car from your grandparents?
Probably.
Maybe your sister?
I don't think she had a car at that time.
Brother?
Which brother?
Carl?
Possibly. I'm trying to remember how many vehicles he had at that time. He had more than one for his house.
Okay. So you could have perhaps traded a vehicle for yours for a few days if you wanted to, right?
Yeah, I could have.
Okay. There were also people in this town, mainly your family, that could have rented a car for you in Wairika if you needed their assistance in doing that for whatever reason. Would that be accurate?
Objection made.
Sustained.
To your belief, would the other people, other family members, have rented a car for you in Wairika if you so desired?
Yes, maybe even a couple of friends.
Okay. But as you told us on direct and on cross, you chose Reading because of the price you were going to pay for the rental car, right?
No, I actually chose Reading because it's the only place that would come up on Priceline or Expedia or whatever I was using. It was the closest place in the direction I was headed that kept coming up when I entered Wairika's zip code.
Okay, in the direction that you were heading, meaning the next question was raised, is this idea that you were heading south through California, correct? That was your itinerary?
Yes.
Okay. So, Reading, California, where is that in conjunction with your first stop, which was the Monterey area?
Probably 6 hours, around there.
Okay. My question to you is it directly in the middle? Is it right off the freeway? Did you have to divert yourself
To go to Monterey?
to go to Reading?
Oh, no, it's right on Interstate 5. Reading is, just like Wairika.
Okay. So stopping and getting in the car at Reading just meant pulling off the freeway and stopping at the airport. Is that what you're telling us?
Objection made.
Overruled.
Well, my brother lived right off the freeway. The airport wasn't too far from his house.
And it was on your way
Yes.
to Monterey. Okay. Now this trip in the Monterey area, I know you talked about many a different town, Seaside, Santa Cruz, that sort of area. But what I want to do is just, I'm going to use the term Monterey area just for simplicity, okay?
Okay.
When you were there at the Monterey area, as it relates, going back to this issue of cars, did Daryl have a car?
Yes, he has a truck.
Okay. And did Matt have a car back at that time?
Yes, Matt always had a few vehicles.
Would those have been cars that you believe that you could have borrowed from either one of these individuals if you wanted to?
Probably not Daryl because it was his only form of transportation, but Matt, certainly.
And Matt being the guy that was brought up on cross-examination, that would never betray you, is that right?
Yes.
After the time you spent in Monterey, we heard about some time you spent in Salinas. Is that right? Did I say that town right?
That's right.
Okay. And Salinas is the city that you got your nails done. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And was this also the city you went to the Starbucks and had this issue with your license plates?
No.
Okay. Where was that? What city was that?
Pasadena.
Okay. Drawing your attention then to this incident with the license plates, do you recall whether it occurred before or after you purchased gas at this AM/PM ARCO station?
I don't recall. It was all around the same time, and I think Starbucks was near Arco. I don't remember if I went there first and then got gas or vice versa.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the gas situation. You had spoken about a gas can you had purchased on June 3rd, Exhibit 237.008. Do you recall seeing that last week?
Yes.
And where was that purchased?
At Walmart in Salinas.
Okay. You said that you returned that. Did you return that right away? Was that before or after you got your nails done?
I think it was before.
And you purchased it before or returned it?
I purchased it. Starbucks is in the same parking lot. I think I went there and then I returned it after that.
Okay, I'm a little confused because you had just told us that the Starbucks you went to was in Pasadena.
That's a different Starbucks. I also got Starbucks in Salinas as well.
Okay. All right. So you purchased this gas can and you decide, well, why do you originally decide to purchase a third gas can? You had two. Why three?
Well, I was thinking about, again, getting cheap gas out of state. And then after I got it, I thought it doesn't really make sense for the math. And there's not a lot of room in my trunk. So it didn't make as much sense as my idea originally, just to fill up on gas and that kind of thing.
So you returned that gas can the same day?
Yes, right after Starbucks. I think that was before I went to get my nails done.
Before you went where?
To get my nails done,
Okay.
I think.
All right. And you didn't get any sort of receipt from that Walmart regarding the return? That's what you told us, correct?
No, I think they just handed me cash or something. I might have gotten a receipt. I don't remember.
Okay. Now, the gas cans you borrowed from Mr. Brewer, you didn't measure them to ensure their accuracy, that they were actually 5-gallon cans? Would that
No.
be fair to say?
That would be fair to say.
Now, staying on the issue of gas, you were shown 3 different receipts from your time at the ARCO station. Now, showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 237.001. Do you recall seeing that?
Yes.
And that was, do you recall now if you paid at the pump or paid inside as it relates to that particular transaction?
Well, I don't recall from memory, but that looks like it was a pay at the pump receipt.
Okay. Drawing your attention to Exhibit 237012. This is a receipt. If we look at the addresses, this appears to be a receipt from the same location, has the same facility number on there, but the receipt is different. Can you see that?
Yes.
In terms of its structure. And I know you don't work for ARCO, but do you recall the difference here? Do you think you paid, I see a clerk number was pointed out, 2525. Clerk number, do you believe you paid inside, or do you believe that you paid at the pump on that one?
That would probably be inside, because I also think that's the only way you can prepay
Okay.
for a certain amount.
And as it relates to these exhibits here, you prepaid $40 at 9.59 gallons. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you said you prepaid that amount. Do you recall, did that go in the car as it relates to the $40? Did that go into the car, or did that go into gas cans?
Well, I don't recall specifically. I'm pretty sure, though, that I filled up my car and then the gas, or I really don't recall specifically.
Okay. As it relates to Exhibit 237.013, we can see another receipt that mirrors the format of 237012. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
Same clerk number and same prepayment. You prepaid, it looks like, as to the exhibit ending in 013, you prepaid $20. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, question was raised mathematically to you as to where that gas could have gone. Looking at these two receipts, the prepayment receipts, we see 9.54 gallons, correct?
Yes.
And barely here, it appears we see 2.774 gallons, right?
Yes.
Okay. Assuming that the gas cans you had were 5-gallon cans. Those cans would have been pretty full had you put this $40 in the gas cans. Right? Been darn close to full.
Yeah, assuming they were 5 gallons, yeah,
Okay.
each.
So this 277 couldn't have gone in that second gas can or any more in the gas cans, could it have?
No.
As it relates to these two receipts, since they are of similar format as we've spoken about, do you believe, to your memory, that these receipts, these two receipts we see here, were going into the same item?
I don't think so. Well, unless it was the car. Certainly not the gas cans.
Okay.
Well, unless they were more than 5-gallon capacity.
Okay. As it relates to the car, when you were at this gas station and prepaying for gas, did you know exactly, I'm going to need blank amount of gallons of gas to fill up my tank?
No, I didn't know that.
Did you leave that Arco station with a full tank of gas in your car?
I believe I did, yes.
As it relates to the gas cans, $10 worth, do you remember when you filled up the gas cans, did you fill those both up to the very top of the can?
No, I was actually worried about doing that because I didn't want to have an overflow of highly flammable substance on the outside of the container or on my hands or anything.
So the gas cans, to your recollection, you did not fill all the way up. Is that accurate?
I would say that's accurate. I think I just picked it up to see if it felt full.
Okay. Judge.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will take the noon recess at this time. Please remember the admonition. We will see you at 1:25. You are excused.
Please stand for the jury.
Record will show the jury has left the courtroom in this area. She may step down. Counsel, anything before lunch?
No, Your Honor, thank you. the can you bought at, in Salinas was 5 gallons, you would add 15 gallons of capacity of gas in those gas cans. Is that correct?
Considering the 3 gas cans, yes, correct.
Okay. We're assuming you have 3 gas cans. All right. Now, looking at the receipts we have here, again, the first in time is the 8:42 p.m. You see that on there? The time?
Yes,
Okay. 8:42 p.m. being the first in time, that's 8.3 gallons, right?
yes.
Okay. Now, if, and we saw this receipt here for the small quantity of gas, the 2.77 gallons, right?
Right.
All right. So, rounding off some of the numbers, we would have 2.7 gallons and 8.3 gallons, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So if we have, that makes for a total of 11 gallons. Just over 11 gallons if we carry some of the numbers, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So in order for that to go into the gas cans, you would have had to fill the gas cans and then 10 minutes later come back, put a little more into one of the cans. You didn't fill 15 gallons worth here, right?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Now, and just for the record, the comparison related to Exhibit 237013, comparing this now to 237012, and looking at the times, you had 20 military time being 20:53 and 24 seconds as to the receipt that's on your left, correct?
Correct.
And about a minute and a half later or so, you would put more gas, or you'd purchase more gas. Correct?
Can
That's
you?
the one we see on the right, looking at 20:54:52.
I can't quite see the time on the right.
Judge, the lack of foundation is putting in the gas. There's 2 times listed on each of the receipts. Foundation hasn't been established as to which one, the one she used to put the gas in.
State your next question.
Ms. Arias, let me do, maybe I'll do it this way so you can see it a little better, so there's no confusion.
I apologize. I can actually see it. I was just confusing my left and right, and I couldn't see the left, and I thought that was
Okay.
right. So I can see it.
We see this receipt 20:54:52, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now these receipts, these two here, the receipts that are of similar nature, now I'm going to have to zoom back out. These 2 receipts that are of a similar nature, this is also after over 10 gallons of gas, right?
Yes. In total, yes.
Yeah, so we have 2.7 gallons and we have 9.6 gallons roughly. So again, we would have this situation where if this would have gone into a gas can, the 3rd gas can, you just, for whatever reason, would have put very little in it. Right?
As in the 2 gallons? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's nonsensical.
Okay. When you had filled, you mentioned a couple different occasions when you filled your car with gas. And you mentioned, I want to make sure I get it, Desert Sky?
Desert Center. I think
Desert
it's
Center.
called.
And also you mentioned filling up gas in bucket, right?
Yes, at the Shell.
Okay. Now, if you remember, do you remember the quantity of that gas being closer to the equivalence of these 13 gallons we see here?
It was around that, yes, each time.
So it might be a safer bet that this gas went into the car in these receipts. Is that correct?
Leading speculation. She can just tell us.
Sustained.
Do you believe then, looking at these receipts from 2053.24 and 2054.52 from the register, that those were more likely to have gone in your Ford Focus rental car?
Objection, speculation. She doesn't know.
Sustained.
Do you see it likely, to your recollection, that you would have filled up one source of gas at 8:42 p.m., put more gas in at 20:53, and bearing in mind now, Miss Arias, even if you had that third gas can, that would be a good 16 gallons worth, right?
Yes,
Over 16 gallons. So that couldn't have gone into any gas cans, even if you had this third gas can, correct?
that's correct.
Okay.
Objection, speculation.
Overruled.
Okay. So, going back to my question then, do you believe that you would have filled one source, came back, and 10 minutes later thought that you could have put $40 into the gas cans after putting 8.3 gallons into them?
Objection, speculation. She can tell us what she did. She's asking her to speculate.
Sustained. Restate your question.
Having filled two, if the first one, the first receipt were to be the gas cans, and you put in $34 to fill both gas cans, would it make sense to you that you would put $40 worth of gas, try to put that into the remaining gas can?
Objection, speculation. It won't make sense.
No, that makes no sense.
Okay. Bringing back, removing Exhibit 237001, and now including 237013. Does it make more sense then that you were filling the tank with these receipts?
Objection, speculation as to what makes more sense.
Overruled.
Yes, I would have prepaid for that and then topped it off.
Okay. Now, as it relates to your time in Pasadena, there was several questions about your license plate related to your time at Starbucks, in Pasadena, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And your testimony on cross seemed to be such that you came out of this Starbucks and there were some skaters rolling away or skating away when you came out of the Starbucks. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And to your recollection, it's my understanding that you didn't recall the exact time of this event. Is that accurate?
No, it was dark, but I don't remember the exact time. It wasn't too late.
Okay, but the sun was down. You recall
The sun
that?
was down, yes.
Okay. And the parking lot was lit by artificial light?
Yes.
Okay. And you are parked with the front end of your car facing towards the building, from what you told us. Is that right?
No, it was pulled into the parking space facing the curb. The building would have been behind me and off to the right a little bit.
Okay. And in terms of, so when you walked out of the Starbucks, the first part of the vehicle, your rental car, that you would have seen was the back end of it.
That's right.
Okay. So when you saw these skaters going away, you didn't notice anything wrong with the back part of your car, is that?
Objection meeting.
Sustained.
Did you notice anything wrong with the back of your car?
No, I just noticed some people skating away from the area of my car, and I didn't think much of it at first.
Okay. Now, you told us that you got in your car and you saw your license plate. Or, well, you saw an object that later you discerned was a license plate.
Right,
correct?
as I was backing out, the headlights
Okay.
caught it.
And remind us again the position of this license plate when you saw it.
It was sort of leaning against the, whatever that thing is called, the cinder block, I
Okay.
guess. It was leaning against that.
All right.
Not tall, but like, lengthwise.
Okay. And do you remember whether it was the front of the plate or the back of the plate that you were observing?
I don't remember, but I think it was,
Objection speculation.
Sustained.
You testified on cross-examination that you saw this plate, whatever side of it was, you saw it reflecting. And
Yes.
it caught your attention, right?
yes, it
Okay.
did.
And you told us that you looked out and you saw you got out of the car, right?
That's right.
And you saw this plate, and it sounds like you logically concluded that it would be yours because of the bugs that weren't on the front end of your car, right?
Objection meeting. So it's characterization logically. Vouching.
Sustained.
Okay. You go out to the front of your car and you look at this object, right?
Yes.
Okay. And why would you do that? Why would you get out?
Well, because it flashed and I just had that instinct for a second. I thought, well, what is that? Because it made a bright flash when my headlights caught it. So I got out to find out what it was.
Okay. And did you examine the object to discern what it was?
Yes, I could see it was a regular modern California license plate.
Okay. And what led you to believe or to conclude that the license plate that you observed laying against the cinder block was the license plate that was related to your rental car?
Well, I picked it up and I noticed on the front there were a bunch of dead bugs stuck all over it, and I glanced at my car. It didn't have a license plate. It had also dead bugs all over the bumper, except in the rectangular area where there should be a license plate. So I just kind of looked at it, looked at my car, put two and two together, realized what might have happened, and then I just wanted to get back in my car very quickly.
Okay. You mentioned that you were, you said you wanted to get back in your car quickly. Sounds like you were uneasy or uncomfortable at that point in time from what you told us on cross?
Yes, after I perceived that someone had messed with my car, I wanted to get back in the car and lock the doors.
Now, you later learned when you were in Utah that, well, let me ask you this. This license plate, the way it was leaned up against this cinder block, did it look to you like it had been intentionally laid there?
That's actually like a foundation. How would you know the intent of the people that moved it?
I asked her how it
Overruled.
looked.
Overruled, you may answer.
Yes, it looked like it was placed against the cinder block.
And you later learned that your rear license plate had been turned upside down when you were pulled over in Utah, correct?
That's correct.
So could it have been the case that somebody was in the process of flipping your front license plate around when you saw it?
That was my thought.
Objection, speculation.
Okay, so you place a license plate in your car and you proceed on your trip, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
I put it on the floorboard.
On the floorboard.
Yeah, it was kind of
Okay.
dirty with a bunch of bugs on it.
All right. Now, you mentioned on your trip that you stopped in, we mentioned this a bit earlier as well, you stopped to get gas at 2 different locations on the way in, correct?
Do you mean from Pasadena?
From Pasadena to Mesa, you stop and buy gas twice.
That's correct.
Okay. And your recollection is that you paid cash for that gas, correct?
That's my well, I think I paid cash. I'm not really sure. I just know I went and got gas there and paid for it and got back on the road.
Now, as it relates to gas and the purchase of gas and filling up with gas, you had talked to us about how one of the reasons that you wanted the gas cans was to save money on gas. Do you remember telling us that?
Yes, that's why I originally wanted the gas cans from Daryl to borrow them.
Instead of filling up your car with the gas cans on the way into Mesa, you are telling us that you chose to fill up the tank from a pump instead of those cans.
Yes.
Okay.
First at Desert Center, and then that would be Buckeye.
Okay. Why did you choose then to retain the gas that was in your gas cans?
Well, when I got to Pasadena and I realized I wasn't going to hook up with Laura, which was Daryl's sister, and I wasn't going south to San Diego to visit John Dixon, that was out. I was going to get on the road and head on I-15 and go to Utah. I'd never driven I-15. I'd never driven across Nevada. I understand that it goes maybe through the southern part of the state. It's desert. I mean, I don't know what's out there. I mean, I was concerned about driving across that area in the middle of the night, being alone, never having driven that road before. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't run out of gas. So I put gas up first in my tanks so that I didn't run out of gas in the middle of nowhere. That was my fear.
Okay. So it wasn't just about saving money, it was about concern about running out of gas on the way to Utah.
Yeah, I was hoping to save money, but I was more concerned for my safety once I realized I was driving 12 hours to somewhere I'd never driven before.
Okay. Now, I want to talk to you about arriving at Travis's house and some of the things that happened on June 4th as to what you can recall, okay?
Okay.
In that regard, when you spoke to Mr. Martinez, during several points, not to, but mostly as it related to June 4th, you had brought up that you have memory issues that affect you during stressful times. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And you mentioned specifically when men are yelling at you.
Objection is characterized as your testimony.
Was that your testimony?
I said screaming or grilling.
Okay. All right. So screaming or grilling was your words. I just want to make sure we get it right.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, in this regard with this response, before we get into it a little further, you're not a psychologist, are you?
No, I'm not.
You're not a psychiatrist, are you?
No.
You have no training in assessing memory loss?
No.
No training in assessing post-traumatic stress disorder?
No.
No training in assessing the psychological effects that can befall a battered woman?
No.
What I think you can tell us about is you and your reaction. So I want to focus on that.
I object to the characterization of what I think, irrelevant what he thinks.
Sustained.
Jodi, even without this training, you can tell us things about this reaction, can't you?
The reaction on June 4th?
Not the reaction on June 4th, but this general reaction to men yelling at you, stress, grilling you. I'll use your words.
Yes.
Okay.
And I should be clear, it's not just men. It's not limited men. It's primarily, but it could be my mom. It could be any female as well. Just somebody yelling.
Okay. Let's talk about, if you can recall for us, this condition, if you will, for lack of a better word, when you remember this condition beginning, when are your first memories of you realizing, geez, when this happens, I just lose focus of what's going on?
Again, this characterization. She has memory issues, not losing focus.
Sustained.
Do you remember things better when you are able to focus on what you're doing?
Yes.
When people yell at you or you're in stressful situations, do you lose focus on what's going on?
I do.
Okay. When do you remember this condition or beginning to have this response to this sort of stimulus, the yelling, the anger?
I remember it really began when I was around 14, I think. Not as prolific as when I was with Travis ultimately, but my parents would yell at me over things, and it sort of increased. Then I moved away for a while and spent about 10 years away from that environment, and it got a little bit better. There was one point when Daryl yelled at me one time in our entire relationship, and I almost had a nervous breakdown. It was pretty intense. And then aside from those things, after getting together with Travis, it took several months, probably 6 months, but he began to snap and yell, and like I said yesterday, I think it was, he would just chuck me.
That's when it started.
Sustained.
Okay. It started when you were about 14. It sounds like it wasn't a big issue for you again until your relationship with Mr. Alexander. Is that accurate?
Sustained.
This condition, did it begin to come into play again once your relationship with Travis Alexander began.
Yes, it did.
Okay. Now, in that regard, do you remember the first instance where this condition came into effect?
During my relationship with
Yeah,
Travis?
with Travis.
Well, on the road, when we were on the way to the Getty Center.
Objection, speculation. If she doesn't remember, how could she relate something she doesn't remember?
She was answering the question, Judge. She didn't say she didn't remember.
Question.
Your relationship with Mr. Alexander. He yelled at you, right?
Yes.
And did that give rise to this flustered condition?
Yes, and eventually the shaking and all that.
Okay. Do you remember, what is your first memory of this happening with Mr. Alexander?
The shaking didn't really start till the fall, 2007.
Objection, non-responsive. She was being asked if she remembers not remembering.
Overruled.
But as far as getting flustered, it was when the first, I'd seen him angry before with Abe and all those things, but he really flipped out when he was driving my car, and so I just hunkered down, hoping we could hurry up and get there so we could end that hell ride, basically.
And was this, we talked this morning about the instance where you were stuck in traffic and he was beating on your car. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. That was the first incident you remember. Were there other incidents you remember?
Yes.
And in that regard, what was the next time you remember?
The
having
next time I think he flipped out on me was mid-August.
In August of 2007?
Object is the characterization. Is she flipping out? Is she answering the question of when she had the reaction, or when, according to her, Mr. Alexander got upset?
Right, sustained.
August of 2007, you told us about Mr. Alexander beating his head against the walls of his home. Do you recall telling us that?
Yes.
Did you have this reaction at that point in time?
Objection, like the foundation downstairs or upstairs?
Overruled.
Yes.
At this point in time, August of 2007, we heard the testimony that Mr. Alexander had not yet been violent with you, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you've just told us about having this flustered reaction to these events when there was contact, when he was making contact with an object. Would mere yelling trigger this for you with Mr. Alexander?
Yes, I didn't want him to be angry.
Okay. So, if he would call you, when he called you a whore and a slut and yelled at you, would you have this reaction?
Objection, lack of foundation. When he allegedly called her this.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part of your objection.
Lack of foundation. When did he allegedly call her this?
Overruled, you may answer.
Yeah, it occurred during those times.
And when he yelled at you about not having enough money to loan him, or John Dixon, did this also occur?
Objection, cover that question.
Sustained.
Okay. Let's talk about this Havasupai trip and this backpack. You've told us that when you were behind closed doors in the bedroom in Mr. Freeman's home, Mr. Alexander was yelling at you about your interaction, the time you spent with John Dixon in Irvine, California, right?
Yes, but to be clear, it was in Travis's home, not Dan's.
Okay. And is this the incident when he was referring to Mr. Dixon as Mr. Dickhead?
Yes, John Dickett.
And when he's yelling at you and saying, you shouldn't be hanging out with John Dickhead, did you have this reaction?
Yes, it was very stressful. I was crying.
Objection. She's already answered the question.
Apart from losing your memory and being foggy, what else did you experience?
Objection by recommendation. She said she loses her memory. She didn't say being foggy at that point.
Sustained.
What else happened apart from this condition with your memory and your response? Were you shaking when he was yelling at you about John Dickhead?
I was shaking and crying, yes. I was trying to brush my teeth.
Objection. She's already answered the question.
Sustained.
Okay. Can you think of any other times when Mr. Alexander yelled at you and you became disoriented to the point of causing memory loss?
Yes, and to be clear, foggy falls under that. I mean,
Objection. She's not answering the question.
Overruled. The answer is stand.
Okay.
they're not complete blackouts. So, I mean, things just get scrambled. I don't know how else. There would be the time when we were arguing in his bedroom and he didn't let me leave the first few times, and then eventually I left. I think he yelled at me one more time. There was another time in August when he was in Utah, and that was over the phone. I mean, there were several times.
Well, you could even have this reaction over the phone with him.
Yes.
Distance was immaterial to your reaction,
Objection leading.
correct?
Sustained.
Would distance matter to you in terms of this reaction?
It didn't matter.
When you had this reaction, were you able to rationalize and say, hey, Mr. Alexander's X amount of miles away, I don't have to worry about it? Could you make that rationalization?
No, my rationalization was he's
Objection. She's
come,
answered the question.
Overruled.
that he's X amount of miles away, and that didn't matter because he was coming back anyway.
Okay. So, as far as this reaction goes, how is it different, if at all, before you met Travis Alexander and after you met Travis Alexander?
There was no shaking, just maybe a little disorientation. I just remember when my dad would get in my face, similar things would happen with Travis. Like one time he was screaming at me and some of his spit got on me, and I went to wipe it off, and he took offense to that in a bad way.
Was that Travis or your dad?
My dad.
Okay.
And, I mean, sometimes Mom screams and I don't know, I don't like to listen to it, so.
Okay. Now, as it relates to June 4th, one of the things that you were asked about is the correlation, if you will, between August 2007 and June of 2008 in terms of your placement or your choice, the choices that you made as far as what you chose to do is running away as opposed to fighting for your life. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, between August 7th, or August of 2007 and June of 2008, there were some violent incidents, weren't there?
Yes, there were.
between August of '07 and June of 2008, what was the first incident of violence?
Well, I didn't consider when he pushed me down twice violent.
Okay, but that was the first incident, right?
I guess I would classify it as I understand it now, yes.
Okay. That occurred, if I recall, in his bedroom. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And that was a situation where you couldn't get away from him in the bedroom, right?
Objection, lady.
You were in the bedroom. Could you get away?
No, not at first.
You couldn't run away from him?
Well, the first 2 times I tried, he stopped me.
Caught you, right?
Yes.
The reaction that we've talked about, you talked about the yelling and things like that. During this occasion, do you remember experiencing the fear and the shaking and the symptoms that you talked about earlier?
When was that? I'm sorry.
When you were thrown down in his bedroom and not allowed to leave?
Yes.
After that incident, when was the next incident of violence?
It would have been when he broke my finger on the 22nd of January.
Okay. And that incident, where did that happen?
That was just at the end of at the end of his bed on the carpet.
In the bedroom, right?
Yes.
And you couldn't get away, could you?
Objection, lady.
Could you get away?
I didn't attempt to get up. I was trying to deflect his kicks. I guess the answer would be no at first.
You didn't even try to get away because you didn't feel like you could. Is that what you're telling us? I could have finished my question, Judge.
Finish your question.
Is that what you're telling us, that you didn't feel like you had much chance of getting away?
Objection, lady.
Overruled.
I was more concerned with deflecting his foot because he kicked my ribs and it really hurt. So my thought wasn't, I guess in the back of my mind, of course I wanted to get away, but the immediate threat was his foot.
And when you're on the ground and he's kicking you, are you having the same reaction that we've been talking about here this afternoon? The shaking, the fogginess.
Yes.
The third instance of violence, where did that take place?
That one was in the car on the freeway.
Okay. And how about the last instance of violence? Was that June 4th?
No, that would have been right before I moved when he choked me until I lost consciousness.
And where did he choke you where you lost all consciousness?
We were near his dresser in the bedroom.
Again, in the bedroom. Behind these closed, locked doors that we saw earlier in this testimony, right? Earlier in this case.
Objection, lady.
Overruled.
Yes, the doors were closed.
So you had sex behind closed doors and he beat you behind closed doors. Is that correct?
Objection, lady.
Overruled.
Well, when I think of beating, I think of fists. He never hit me with his fists, but yeah, that's where the violence occurred, and the one time in the car.
Okay. The instance where he was choking you in the bedroom near his dresser. Did you feel like you could get away, just get up and run down the stairs?
No, definitely not then, because he was straddling me and all his weight was on me and his hands were around my neck.
In that episode, did you attempt to get away?
At first I thought of clawing at his face, but then I couldn't do that. It didn't feel right to gouge his eyes out or something. I didn't have a lot of thought. I didn't have a lot of time to think because my arms got very heavy and I just remember them falling and then passing out.
When you were there, on your back, in his bedroom, being choked, did you consider the possibility that you were going to die that day?
I don't think I considered it afterward, but I didn't have enough time to think. I just remember everything going black. I couldn't breathe. That's what it was.
So in all these incidents of violence, and I know you may not characterize it that way, but you never considered running away an option, right?
Objection made.
Did you consider running away during any of these incidents to be a viable option?
Not as the incidents were going down, not during that period. No.
Okay. Now, another thing you were asked about as it relates to what happened on June 4th is the fact that Mr. Alexander was in shape. Do you recall being asked that?
Yes.
But was he a sprinter or a marathon runner?
I know he liked to walk on the treadmill, but I'm not sure about marathons and things.
Did you run? Did you jog?
No, actually I didn't. I was very active in my job, but not running.
Now, on June 4th, 2008, you had posed for some pictures for Mr. Alexander. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. And we talked earlier in the testimony about how you did certain things and you said certain things. I believe this came up yesterday because Travis wanted them and you enjoyed pleasing him, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I want to show you, direct your attention to Exhibit 164. And I'm going to attempt just to try to highlight as to your face. Can you see your face there?
Yes.
Were you having some kind of independent fun there? Because you kind of look not so happy.
Objection, Council.
Sustained.
You happy there?
I was uncomfortable.
And why were you posing for that picture?
Well, it's something he'd been wanting to do for a long time. He had the new camera, he was excited about it. It was closed doors, it was private, and he said we could delete them.
Now this photograph that we just saw, the headshot of 164, was this before or after you were tied up?
I think it was after.
Okay.
I'm not entirely sure of the sequence of events, but I want to say it was after.
Okay. Now this rope that you were tied up with, I think you made the assessment that it was about 20 feet long, right?
Yeah, I don't know exact feet. I just know the length from this place to this place, like the bathroom to the bedroom. It was
Okay.
pretty long.
And you do not know, or do you know, the width of Mr. Alexander's headboard?
No, it was a king-size bed, but I don't know what the width is.
Do you know the amount of rope that it took? Well, let me back up a second. You described your wrist being bound in a noose-like manner. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you know how many inches or feet of rope it took in order to have your these nooses around your hands?
No, I let Travis handle that.
Okay. All right. These nooses that were around your hand, can you recall for us, were they wrapped several times, just once? Do you know?
Objection, in this case, that's what she previously said, wrists.
I said her wrists.
Overall.
I don't remember how he made the knots, but I remember just being able to slip my hands in and out. Not like really loose, but they weren't tight.
Okay. They weren't tight around your wrists, right?
Yeah.
When you say tight, that's what you mean.
Overruled.
Yeah, it wasn't cutting off the blood flow or anything.
Can you recall if it was tight as it related to the bed?
I recall it being taut, like when I couldn't really move my arms a whole lot. I could only bring them a certain distance this way because it was tight, the rope was.
Okay. And your wrists, they would have been, from what you told us earlier, they would have been at the very corners of the bed. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Were they still on the bed or were they off the bed? Your hands?
While they were tied up,
Yes.
they were on the bed in the
Okay.
corners.
All right. In the very corners, but there wasn't a lot of wiggle room back and forth, right?
Objection,
Was there a lot of wiggle room back and forth?
I would say no.
Okay.
It was tight.
All right. In terms of your wrists as well, were they very close to the headboard or were they several inches back on the bed?
I don't recall. I mean, my head wasn't hitting the headboard. I don't recall. My arms were stretched.
Okay. Once you got your wrists out of those nooses, do you recall the rope being still on the bed?
No, I don't think it was.
Okay. What, after you were loose from this rope, did you move around on the bed when you were posing for these pictures? How did that work?
Yes, after that first, I'm trying to remember this sequence of pictures. I think Travis started off on the side of the bed, standing next to the bed, and he took a picture of me, and then he climbed onto the bed and took more pictures.
Okay. So once the rope got off wrist, you have no idea where it went. Is that what you told us on cross?
Objection relief.
Oh, the answer yes to that.
I can't remember if he took the rope or if he just...
Okay.
Do you remember what happened with the rope?
No. Well, not ultimately. I threw it in a dumpster, but I don't remember at that point where the rope was. I mean, that part we used. The rest of it was just on the floor.
Now, one thing we saw in the pictures from that day, apart from everything else, we saw that there was a bottle of KY lubricant on the bed. Do you recall seeing those?
Yes.
And I kind of neglected earlier, there were some comments on your direct examination about, and through the tape, snippets of the tape were played, the recording from May 10th, that you introduced Mr. Alexander to KY. Is that correct?
Correct.
And is it true that you did indeed, in fact, introduce him to KY?
Yes, that's true.
Why did you introduce KY into the relationship?
Objection relief.
Overruled. You may continue.
Ms. Arias, the question before you was why you chose to introduce Mr. Alexander to KY.
Well, there were several reasons. The main reason being that some of the activities that he wanted to do were painful without it, and he was not willing to go to the store and buy it. So like I had said before, after he ran out of Astroglide, he never went back to the store.
The scope of the question, why? Not whether or not she went to the store.
Sustained.
Okay. Well, let's break that down a little bit, Jodi. You said some of the activities that he wanted to engage in were painful if it were not for KY. What are those activities?
Sex.
Are we talking vaginal sex or are we talking anal sex? Or oral sex?
Anal.
Anal sex. Okay. And from what you've told us before in your sex life, anal sex was not a passion of yours. Is that correct?
It had never been a regular part of my thing with people that I've been intimate with.
But you had said in other parts of your testimony it came through this idea that Travis was very persuasive, right? You heard that?
Yes, that was true.
So it stands to reason then that if Travis wanted to have anal sex with you, he's probably going to get to do so, right?
Objection, speculation, or characterization of the evidence not changing.
I'm going to sustain the objection.
Well, let's back up. You recall telling us about the incident after you were baptized and Mr. Alexander had anal sex with you when you weren't expecting that to take place?
Yes.
You didn't protest that?
Only after it began.
Objection, the question is, did she protest that?
Overruled.
I did after it was underway for a few seconds.
And there were other occasions when you had anal sex with Mr. Alexander, correct?
Yes.
And you introduced him to the KY to reduce the pain of those encounters, correct?
That was one of the reasons.
You weren't willing instead to say no to those encounters.
I couldn't imagine saying no.
Objection. She was asked whether or not she could say no to those encounters.
Sustained.
Why not?
During a lot of that time I was in love with Travis, and I probably would have done that any time that he wanted to.
Okay. When you were in love with him, would it be fair to say that he had an all access pass to your body?
Yes.
Now you said, in terms of introducing him to KY, that you said that Mr. Alexander was not willing to buy it himself. Recall telling us that a few moments ago?
Yes.
And without telling us what he said, what was your understanding of the reasons why he wasn't willing to make that purchase himself?
Objection beyond scope of cause.
Approach, please.
Why were you the one who purchased the KY jelly that you and Mr. Alexander were choosing to use?
Travis did not want to be seen buying that. He knew a lot of people in East Mesa and a lot of people from his church.
Did you purchase this KY at his request?
Jackson asked that answer, she indicated that. Her answer stands.
Roll, Jimmy.
I don't recall him making a specific request for me to go out and buy it. Well, when it was discussed that we would buy it, he refused, so I did. But I don't recall him saying, please go out and do it. I just know that he wouldn't.
Did you have a desire to purchase it to avoid the pain?
Objection, lady. Overruled.
Certainly, that was one of the reasons I bought it.
Okay. Judge, could we take the break a few minutes early?
Yes, we'll take the afternoon recess at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, please be back in the jury room at 10 minutes after 3. Please remember the admonition. You are excused.
Please stand for the jury.
The record will show the jury has left the courtroom. Ms. Arias, you may step down. Did you need a bench conference? No.
No, Your Honor. Just get things together.
Judge, we'll be back, what, at 10 after, I think you said?
10 after, yes.
Thank
We are in recess. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Arias, in talking about what happened on June 4th, you testified to not remembering much at all after the gunshot and him falling on you, correct?
Yes.
Okay. But at other points in time, you were asked if you were the one who stabbed him. Do you remember being asked that?
Yes.
Okay. And you said that you were, right?
Yes.
Are you basing your answer that yes, you were the one who stabbed him on a memory or on the logic of the fact that you were the only one who could have done it?
The latter, just on logic.
Okay. As it relates to the question that you were asked about slashing his throat, do you recall being asked if you were the one who slashed his throat?
Yes.
Do you have any memory of doing that?
No.
Would I be correct in assuming then you were just filling in the blank? Logically, you must have been the one because you were the only one there.
Objection, meaning also relevance as to whether or not he would be correct.
Approach, please. Continue.
You don't remember slashing his throat, correct?
Objection meeting.
Sustained.
Do you have any memories of slashing Mr. Alexander's throat?
No.
When you were asked on cross-examination if you did that, do you recall telling us that you did?
Yes.
Was that a recollection or a logical assumption on your part?
It was definitely not a recollection, so it was just based on the facts that I knew.
The gaps or the lack of memory that you have as it relates to these events, and as you tell them on different occasions, do you sometimes find yourself putting in these assumptions into your memories?
I have made attempts to piece things back together, and so based on what I've learned since, there's still big blanks. So I don't know, but I know certain facts that can't be refuted, but it doesn't mean that I know those facts because I remember them.
Are you telling us then that you want to remember what happened on June 4th?
Objection is erroneous. And beyond scope.
Approach, please. Overruled. You may continue.
The events of June 4th, 2008, do you want to remember those?
There's a part of me that doesn't ever want to remember it, and a part of me that I feel like I'm
Judge, ma'am, she's not answering the question, Judge.
Overruled.
I feel like I'm the person who deserves to sit with those memories that I don't have right now.
You feel a desire to punish yourself with those memories?
Objection, leading.
Is that what you're telling us?
Objection, leading.
Why do you feel like you deserve to live with those memories?
Because they were my actions, and it's my responsibility.
Now, as it relates to just stepping back to a memory a little bit, you were asked about Miss LaViolette and whether you ever told her that you saw Mr. Alexander viewing child pornography on the computer. Do you remember doing that?
Telling her that?
Mm-hmm.
I never told her that.
Now, when you spoke about June 4th with Mr. Martinez, we saw a clip of yourself and Detective Flores. We saw that clip several times where you were talking about shower pictures. You recall talking to Detective Flores about that, seeing that clip of last week?
Yes.
Okay. And part of that clip dealt with Travis not going for it and these pictures of him shaving. You remember that?
Yes.
You were also shown during that point in time Exhibit 159. A moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
Perhaps if Mr. we could approach.
Mr. Martinez, please approach.
The cross-examination as to this issue of shaving, Exhibit 159. Do you recall being shown that?
Yes.
Back up a little bit here. And you recall being asked in conjunction with that picture whether or not Mr. Alexander was freshly shaved in that photo. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And to your recollection, do you remember seeing him shave that day?
I was not aware of him shaving at all that day.
Judge, I didn't hear what she said.
Just repeat
I'm
your
sorry.
answer.
I was not aware of him shaving at all that day.
Now, I want to zoom in. You said you looked like he was freshly shaven. You take a look at that image.
Yes.
Do you see what appears to be stubble on his face?
Objection, leading.
Overruled.
Yes.
So then would you say then, looking at that picture, that he was indeed not freshly shaven?
Objection made.
Overruled.
I see the stubble. Travis didn't have stubble when he shaved. Sometimes there might have been a shadow left behind, so that picture may not tell, but I do see stubble there above his mouth and on his chin.
Okay. Now, you were also asked about, and in this photograph, you were asked about a shaving incident and following up on this stubble, and it went back and forth several times about pictures you took of him shaving. You've just told us that you did not see Mr. Alexander shaving on June 4th, correct?
Objection states the testimony. She says she doesn't remember. No.
Restate your question.
Okay. Did you take pictures of Mr. Alexander shaving on June 4th?
No, I did not.
On other occasions, had you taken photographs of Mr. Alexander shaving?
Yes, one occasion.
And do you remember that occasion, when that took place?
It was early 2008.
And that picture, was that immediately erased, or did that go anywhere?
They were a series of photos and they were saved. I probably erased the ones that didn't turn out great, but they were saved.
To your knowledge, did he ever post any of those pictures online?
Yes, at least one that I know of, maybe more.
And where would he have posted those?
MySpace. I don't know about his Facebook.
I'm sorry, what's that?
I don't know about Facebook, but I know I saw it on MySpace.
I want to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 513. You take a look at that, please.
Okay.
And what is that?
That's a picture of Travis shaving.
Was that the true and accurate depiction of the picture you took of him shaving back in early part of the year in 2008?
Yes, and if my memory serves me correctly, it was early 2008.
Okay.
It was several months before June.
Okay.
That was in the mirror.
And this photograph that's in 513, was that the photograph you were referring to when you were talking to Detective Flores about taking pictures of him shaving, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I'm going to move to admit Exhibit 513.
No objection.
513 is admitted.
That's the picture you took of Travis shaving.
Yes, that's one of them. From that same day.
Okay. But that's the one you were talking about.
Objection made.
Sustained.
Taken with his permission?
Yes.
And on that same clip, when we were talking about this picture of Mr. Alexander shaving, there was discussion about this photo shoot, we'll call it, in the shower. You were discussing that with Detective Flores on the clip. You recall that?
Yes.
Okay. Was that discussion, did that discussion directly precede June 4th, or was that months in advance?
It began months in advance. And we've discussed it a few times in between that time and June 4th.
Okay. Had you, prior to June 4th, had you taken pictures of Mr. Alexander in the shower?
No.
Now, as it related to this incident, you made some comments that Travis would never let you take pictures of him in the shower. Do you recall that?
Yes.
When you were making that comment, were you referring to June 4th, 2008, or were you referring to a day that preceded that day?
Well, I said that a few times, so there are two different contexts. He would never have wanted the pictures of his waist up prior to June 4th, well, prior to getting in shape, prior to the Cancun announcement and all that. But as he got in shape, that was something we had discussed as he was getting in shape. And then I also said to Flores, no, he would never go for that, because I was still trying to deny the fact that I was even there.
Okay. So these pictures we see on June 4th were something that had been discussed months in advance of June 4th. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Overruled.
And they were something, to understand if I understand your testimony correctly, they were something that took place on June 4th because Travis felt satisfied enough with his body to allow this to occur. Is that accurate?
Objection to the meeting and also relevance as to council satisfaction.
Sustained.
Why did the photo shoot of Mr. Alexander's shower not take place prior to June 4th?
I hadn't seen him since April, and he wasn't quite where he wanted to be with his physique. And by June 4th, he was very proud of how he had more muscle tone and that could be visible.
Okay. Now, when we spoke about what happened on June 4th, one of the things that was discussed, you were shown Exhibit 249. And when you were shown Exhibit 249, several issues about this diagram were discussed. What I want to draw your attention to is a couple of things. You testified about dropping the camera when you were taking these pictures. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. And could you point to us, as best as you can recall, approximately where you were when you dropped this camera?
I was approximately where number 4 would be, somewhere between 3, 4, 74.
Where did you mark that for us on the screen?
It's an estimation, but maybe right about somewhere right there.
Okay. And you were back that distance from what you told us before is because you didn't want the can of water to get on the camera, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you testified that at some point in time, well, let me ask you this. When you were there where you have marked for us, was that where you were when you dropped the camera?
I was right about there.
When you dropped the camera, do you recall if you were standing or squatting?
I was squatting.
Okay. When the camera dropped, where did it come to rest? As best you can recall, as best you can approximate. Could you show us on that?
Yeah, I was facing, I guess it would be south, because we were looking together at the pictures as I was deleting them, and then when I went to adjust the camera again, and
There's objection. She says where. not for a narration.
The statement.
Let's first start with where the camera wound up, came to a rest after you dropped it.
I want to say, it rolled a little bit, so somewhere right, maybe around here.
Okay, around that area. All right. Now, once that happened, and I don't want to use directions as it relates to north, south, east, and west. We'll do it relative to the items we see in here. Okay.
Okay.
You were facing you were facing towards, in the first position when you dropped the camera, you were facing towards items 3 and 4. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And
I'm sorry, I was facing more south. I was kind of lined up next to
no, let's not use north, south, east, and west. What were you facing in this diagram?
I would have been facing more toward the bathroom, the toilet area. I mean, when the camera dropped is what I mean. I was facing Travis when I was taking pictures of him, and then we turned this way so we could look at the photos, the short set.
Okay. And so you actually had your back to the shower when you dropped the camera, correct?
More like my back to the closet area.
Okay. All right. And the camera comes to its resting place near the tub. After you drop the camera, what do you do?
My first thought was to pick it up. It didn't have a long distance that it fell, and it landed on the mat, but it rolled onto the tile. It didn't sound good, but my first thought was that. And then I didn't have time to really think much else after that.
Okay. So that spot where the marker is now, is that approximately where he tackled you?
Are you talking about the last marker that I made?
Mm-hmm.
Approximately, yes.
Okay. Now, when he tackled you,
I'm sorry, that's where I landed, just to be clear.
okay, when you landed in that area, you talked about getting an impact to your head. Remember testifying to that?
Yes.
Okay. At any point in time, were you aware of the fact that you lost, or were you aware of losing consciousness?
No. I don't know if I did or not. I just remember, things start to get a little bit blurry, but I don't remember blacking out at that point.
Now, this occasion here that we were talking about, you also made the comment, using your words, that you got the wind knocked out of you. Do you recall telling Mr. Martinez that?
Yes.
Okay. When you said that, you weren't making a medical diagnosis, were you?
No.
Kind of a figure of speech?
Yes.
All right. We talked about on cross-examination how after this happened, Mr. Alexander was on top of you, correct?
He was standing over me.
Okay. Standing over you, you were on the ground.
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember whether or not you had the camera in your hand?
I did not at that point.
Okay. And he was standing over you around your shin or knees, is what you testified to.
Yes, to my right.
Okay. To your right. And you testified to your recollection that he was yelling at you, right?
Yes, he was.
Do you recall what he's saying?
I only recall those two things that he said about me being an idiot and that a 5-year-old could hold a camera better than me, and he was using profanities when he said those things.
Okay. Do you remember what profanities he was using?
The F word, mostly.
So he's over you yelling, "You're an idiot." You drop the camera, even a 5-year-old hold the camera, correct?
Objection, meeting has an answer.
Overruled.
Somewhat, but that's very mild compared to how
Okay.
it was.
My interpretation is mild
Yes.
for what he was doing. Okay. So when he's over you like this, looking down at you in a more aggressive manner than I'm going to display here, are you having that same reaction that you've had before? Are you shaking? Are you in a fog?
It's more like heightened fear. All of a sudden, I don't know at that point if I was shaking yet. It was all very fast. So I don't know if I even had time to shake. It just started happening. It all happened very fast, and I was very scared.
So you remember when he's over you saying, "You're an idiot," you drop the camera, even a 5-year-old could hold the camera, you're fearful.
Yes, he's angry now.
And you remember, when you were down there, you remember what he did before, didn't you? You remember that he choked you to the point of losing consciousness, didn't you?
Objection, meeting.
Sustained.
Did you remember the fact that this man who was glaring over you on that day had, in prior occasions, choked you to the point you lost consciousness? Did you remember that?
Yes, the very last time previous to this day that he got on top of me was when he choked me and I lost consciousness, and I didn't want him to have the advantage of that position again.
The advantage of that position again. You say that. Were you scared that this was somehow, did you sense that this was somehow different than any other occasion that he'd been violent with you?
It was almost the angriest I'd ever seen him. His anger escalated after the gun went off, but yeah, at this point, I didn't want him to be on top of me again when he was angry, because last time I was afraid that he was going to bring me to that edge again.
The edge being what?
Death.
Okay. So he's over you, he's yelling at you. You told us that at a certain point in time that you rolled away from him. Is this when you rolled away from him?
Yes.
Okay. You rolled away from him, and based on what you told us before, you ran.
Yes.
When you ran, do you know if Mr. Alexander immediately began chasing you? Did he reach for the camera? Do you have any memory of what he did?
I didn't look behind me, but I thought I could hear his footsteps pounding down on the tile.
Okay. Pounding down on the tile. Are you referencing this area here in white? Is this the tile area?
Yes.
Okay. And from what you told us earlier, you began running down the hallway here, this 11-foot, 4-inch hallway.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, when you were doing this, were you looking at your watch thinking about how many second advantage you might have on him?
No.
Did you calculate to yourself, well, I could just run around here and run down the stairs and beat him
No.
down the stairs?
I probably made a quick calculation of the opposite.
Prior experience told you weren't getting away.
Objection, meeting.
Is that correct?
Objection, meeting.
Sustained.
Did your prior experience lead you to believe that you had the ability to get away in this circumstance?
No, it did not.
So, based on your testimony then and on what you said on cross, you head for the closet, correct?
Yes.
showing you Exhibit 69. You head for this closet, correct?
Yes.
And this is where you tell us that you grabbed Mr. Alexander's gun, correct?
Yes, I slammed the door first and then ran.
Okay. You were asked about that a little bit on cross-examination, how far you were in front of him, that you had time to slam the door. Were you making these sort of calculations at this point in time?
Well, when I slammed the door, the idea was to create some kind of obstacle, but no, not to that degree, not making
Okay.
calculations like that.
And point to us again where in this closet the gun was.
He kept it up in this, well, it was in the corner. It wasn't above the clothes necessarily. There's a corner there. It was in the corner.
Okay. And was it sitting out or was it in a box? Recall where was it?
It was sitting up there. I believe it had a holster.
Okay.
Judge, did she see it a little bit? I think she said, I think it was in a holster, but I didn't hear that.
Restate your last answer.
Okay. Yes, it was in a holster at one point.
Okay. You say at one point, this position that you're speaking of here this afternoon, is this where you knew the gun to be based on your prior experiences, Mr. Alexander's house cleaner?
Actually,
Overruled, you may answer.
Yes, that's how I discovered it when I was dusting all the shelves in the closet.
When you went into the closet and shut the door, were you thinking about grabbing the gun?
No, not when I slammed the door.
Looking back at Exhibit 249, when you left Mr. Alexander, to your recollection, he was somewhere around this area, correct?
He was somewhere between there and here. Well, somewhere around here.
And the area of the closet we see here in Exhibit 69, this is the door that is near the bathroom, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So the shortest distance between you and the gun that was back here actually would have been this way, right?
That's right.
But you didn't go that way, right? You went this way.
Yeah, my first thought was just run.
Okay. So as you're running through this closet, as you've already told us, you're not going there with the aim to get the gun because you didn't take the route that would have been consistent with that, correct?
objection, leading to ask and answer.
Sustained.
When was it that you decided, I'm going to grab his gun?
It was almost immediately after I slammed this door, the one where's the photo. This
The one that faces, and just, let's be clear here, because I know it doesn't show both doors, that exhibit. We're talking about this door by the bedroom, right? That's the one you slammed?
Yeah, I slammed it and I began to run past the seat, and it was all split second stuff.
Okay. So you shut that door, you run past the seat, and this little bench is what we're calling the seat.
Yes.
Okay. And that's when you decide to grab this gun.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you testified previously that at a certain point in time, Mr. Alexander had opened the doors these double doors that you had shut, correct?
It's just a single door. He did open
Okay.
it. I don't remember the exact moment, it was as I was either reaching up or coming down, the door opened, and then I ran out the other door.
You say reaching up or coming down, you mean from grabbing the gun in this area here?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, you told us then at that point in time that you ran back out towards the bathroom once you had the gun.
Yes.
Okay. And was Mr. Alexander still pursuing you?
Yes, there was a pretty good amount of distance closed almost. He had more traction on the carpet, and he was coming out the door.
Okay, you said that in kind of a pretty good amount of distance had closed. Are you saying that he was closer to you?
Yes, closer than when he opened the door and I was in the corner.
Okay. All right. One of the things that you were asked about on cross-examination was this idea, and I'm going to move this forward a little bit here so we can see the whole bathroom. You come out of that closet first. That's what you testified to, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you've got this gun, and you're holding it, and you're pointing it. So that's what you told us, correct?
Yes, I ran into the bathroom and I turned and I pointed it.
Okay. Pointed it in what direction?
In the direction of Travis.
Okay. And Travis would have been, based on what you told us before, Travis would have been coming out of this area, right?
Objection, meeting is where it was.
Overruled.
Yeah, he was beginning to come out of the closet.
Okay. Now, when he's beginning to come out of the closet, do you remember, and you can make note of it, where you were?
I was in the center of the bathroom, somewhere in the center.
Okay.
I know that when we fell in the corner up here somewhere.
Okay. When you said you fell. Now, when you were standing in the first spot, outside the closet there, before you fell, he was running towards you, right?
Yes.
Do you remember him saying anything in particular?
When I started down the hallway after I rolled away, he was still screaming at me. And when...
Objection, she was asking at the time he came out of the closet, was he saying anything?
Sustained.
Sorry.
At the time he came out of the closet, was he saying anything, Jodi?
I don't recall words, but he was screaming and he had an angry tone and a loud volume.
Okay. Were you scared?
Yes, I was very, very scared.
Were you still feeling as you did before that this time is different, that he was going to kill you?
Yes. If he got on top of me, I was worried about that.
You grabbed the gun. You've told us before. You grabbed the gun in the hopes that it would make him stop.
Objection, needing asked and answered.
Sustained.
When you grabbed the gun and showed it to him, was it your hope that he would stop?
Objection, asked and answered.
I have not asked him.
Overruled.
Yes, that was the purpose.
Now you testified, we saw you lunge forward, and you described that as like a linebacker would jump, correct?
Yeah, I think because he crouched a little. That's how
Okay.
I described it.
He crouched a little. Do you recall, and I understand you didn't have a tape measure or weren't calculating the distance at this time, but do you have any idea how far Mr. Alexander was from you when he lunged at you?
No, I could approximate, not distance in feet, but maybe as far as maybe the court reporter.
Okay. Oh. Was he this far?
He was closer.
Was he this far?
At one point he was, but when he actually lunged, I think he was a little bit closer.
So when he lunged at you, was he running?
Yes.
So this was a quick moment in time, right?
Yes.
So he's running at you and he lunges.
Yes.
And at the time that he lunged, again, I understand that you didn't have a measuring tape or weren't calculating this, but did you view him to be within reaching distance?
Objection, relevant assistant counsel understands.
Overruled.
When he lunged,
When he lunged at you, did you feel like he was in a position where he would have been able to take you down and get on top of you?
yes, if I stood in one spot.
So when you had this gun in your hand and he was lunging towards you, were you backing up or were you standing still?
I don't remember backing up, but I remember wanting to keep a distance between us.
And you told us on your direct and on cross-examination, you remember the gun going off and him being on top of you, right?
Yeah, we sort of fell. He was kind of on the side of me when we fell.
Now, when this happened, and you mentioned you're back there where the marker is now on the screen there, correct?
Yes,
When
a
you
little,
fell?
a little more toward the corner, a little
Okay.
closer to the sinks.
Okay, a little closer to the sink. When you fell in that direction and he was on top of you, your testimony during cross-examination and on direct was this is when he said, "Fucking kill you, bitch."
Objection, needing.
Overruled.
Is that correct?
The moment I broke away from him, he was grabbing at my clothes and grabbing at me, and I managed to tear away from him. And then at that moment, as I was getting up and getting away from him, he screamed out.
Now, at this moment in time, when he's screaming, "Fucking kill you, bitch," are you looking for the camera so you can make note of it, perhaps if you're on trial 5 years down the road?
No.
Were you making note of where the bullet casing might be in case you were on trial for your actions 5 years down the road?
No.
Instead, based on what you've told us, this is kind of the point in time where you lost your memory, correct?
Objection, needing.
Overruled.
Yes, that is correct.
And at times, we talked about how you want to remember and where the knife was and the fact that you stabbed him with it and cut his throat. All those are kind of things that you're using logical assumptions, not actual memories. Is that accurate?
Objection, we need to ask an answered compound question.
Overruled, any answer?
That's correct.
So, as it relates to this entire exhibit, 249, you don't really know where the knife was, did you? Immediately, after you got up and got out from underneath him.
I have no memory of where it was at rest at that moment.
Okay. You just know it was up there based on the fact of the wounds Mr. Alexander suffered. Is that right? Now, during your cross-examination, you were shown many different photos of water being splashed around, cleanup efforts that you made, you dragging Mr. Alexander's body across the floor. Do you remember seeing those?
Yes.
Do you remember taking any of those actions?
Not those ones.
Okay. Do you remember grabbing the gun and taking it with you?
I don't remember grabbing the gun and taking it with me in the car.
Okay. Do you remember grabbing the rope and taking it with you in the car?
I don't remember putting it in the car.
Okay. Well, to clarify then, do you remember grabbing it from or taking it from Mr. Alexander's bedroom?
No.
Do you remember placing Mr. Alexander's body in the shower?
No.
You told us during your testimony that Mr. Alexander, you remember, not at the time but later on, you remembered kneeling on the bathroom floor, screaming and dropping the knife. Do you remember that?
I remember screaming and dropping the knife. I don't recall the exact position.
Okay. Do you remember how you felt at that moment in time when you were screaming and you were dropping the knife?
I can't really describe it. It's a horrible feeling. I felt I don't know, I felt panic. It's horrible.
Let me show you what's been marked as Exhibit 78. Could you look at that, Ms. Arias? When you went to Mr. Alexander's home on June 4th, 2008, was it ever your intent to leave him lying dead in his shower?
No.
While you were there at his home on June 4th, 2008, did you ever decide that you wanted to kill Mr. Alexander and leave him dead in the shower?
No, that was never my thought that I recall.
As a matter of fact, you didn't want to kill Mr. Alexander on June 4th, 2008, did you?
Objection, lady.
Sustained.
Did you want to kill Mr. Alexander on June 4th?
No, that was not a goal of mine.
Did you want to leave him like that?
That's not how...
Look at that picture. Did you want to leave him like that?
No, I didn't.
Then why was he left like that?
That's how things happened that day. That's not what I...
Objection. Is non-responsive as to
No,
why
it's-
things happen like, or why she left the body like that.
I'm sorry, Mr. Martinez, I couldn't hear you.
Objection, non-responsive as to why the body was left like that.
Restate your answer.
I don't know.
Did you want to kill him on June 4th, 2008?
Objection hasn't answered.
Sustained.
Then why did it happen?
It escalated after he attacked me, and I don't remember the specifics. I just remember panicking, and I remember thinking, he's angry, and I remember him coming after me, and he was coming after me, and he was coming after me, and he wasn't stopping.
Did you have any other choice?
When I was cornered, I didn't feel like I did.
After June 4th, 2008, let's talk about the period of time between June 4th and the point in time when you were arrested on the 15th of July, okay?
Okay.
We saw on your cross-examination and in other parts of your testimony that after June 4th, you sent Mr. Alexander text messages, you sent him emails, and you left him a voicemail. Do you recall those issues being brought to light throughout your testimony?
Yes.
Why did you make those? Why did you contact him at all, regardless of the fashion?
I knew I had done something that I felt was wrong, and I was very scared about everything that was going to happen subsequent to that, and how things were going to unfold, and I did those things after the fact to try and make it look like I hadn't been there. I knew that wouldn't hold up for long, but
Check now, it's the narrative.
Overruled.
Well, go ahead, Ms. Arias.
I knew that likely wouldn't hold up for long. I mean, we slept together that day, all that stuff can be found out. But
Well, let me ask you this, Jodi. You said like you felt like you had done something wrong. You told us just a moment ago that you really felt like you didn't have any other choice but to kill Mr. Alexander because of him attacking you. Do you recall that?
yes,
So, what in your mind did you do that was wrong?
I feel like maybe it should have been me, and that maybe that I made it out of there, and I didn't have a choice, but maybe I did have a choice. I could have just let him do what he was going to do and not fought back. And like I said, when I was at the Hoover Dam and I was leaving that message, and I wasn't thinking, I don't even know what state of mind I was in, but I wasn't thinking that he died. I knew that something awful had happened. And then following with the emails and those things, I knew what had happened was wrong. And my philosophy then is that it's not okay to kill somebody under any circumstance.
When you left Mr. Alexander's home on June 4th, was there a part of you that wished you were the one lying dead on that bathroom floor?
What part would this be? I had that thought,
Part of
but I
you.
don't know what time period you're talking about.
Well, afterwards, after you left.
Not immediately. I don't remember what I was thinking during those hours. But yes, I've had that thought many times afterward.
On cross-examination, you were also asked about lying. On several occasions, you were asked about, do you recall you were asked about conversations you had with Dan Freeman
Yes.
and conversations you had with Leslie Udy. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And conversations that you had with many different people, friends and family, prior to his arrest. Do you remember being asked about that?
Yes.
And the assertion was you lied to these people because you didn't admit that this happened. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And we've also talked at length during your cross-examination about the fact that you lied to Detective Flores. Do you recall that?
Yes.
One of the things that you talked about, or that was asked of you, is that these lies were to benefit you. Do you recall being asked that?
Yes.
What you've told us here today and throughout the course of this trial would also be, or could also be, beneficial to you. Is that correct? About what happened on June 4th.
If I had said that then?
Mm-hmm.
Possibly. I wasn't thinking about benefiting myself at that time. Or I was more just focusing on, I just wanted to die.
What's that?
I just wanted to die. But I was conflicted about, I was conflicted about suicide at that point, but I was beginning to think about it some more. I didn't want-
What was then, putting aside suicide, I wanted you to address the specific issue of what was the benefit of you lying to all these people? Was it to evade responsibility, as was suggested?
Ultimately, that wasn't my goal. Ultimately, I just didn't want people to know that I could have done something like that, because that's not how I lived my whole life. I considered myself a nice person, and I couldn't believe that had happened.
I'm sorry, what was the last part of your answer?
I couldn't believe that had happened, and I was horrified with myself. I was very ashamed.
You mentioned the word shame, but it also came up in your cross-examination and in your testimony in general that you were ashamed of much more than what happened on June 4th, correct?
Yes.
You were ashamed of the sex? Were you ashamed of the sexual behavior?
Somewhat. Not too ashamed that I didn't go to my bishop, but certain aspects of it, certainly. I was ashamed of certain aspects of it.
Certain aspects of it. What do you mean by certain aspects of it?
I didn't want certain things about our sex life to be known. I didn't want people to know what I knew about Travis. I didn't want to de-edify him at this point in time, because it just, one, it seemed hateful, and two, it didn't seem like it would accomplish anything. If I'm going to be dead, what's the point? And I didn't want, people are hurting, and I didn't want to hurt them worse by telling them. Like, I didn't see the point in saying, hey, look at all this stuff that happened between us. It just didn't. And I didn't want anyone to know about the violence, because I thought that people would think, oh, it must have been her because he attacked her, or he this or he that. I didn't want people to know that our relationship had that escalation in it, that type of violence, that type of drama.
You had said earlier in your testimony, you talked about how you became, through the course of this relationship, one of those people, referring to battered women. Do you remember talking about that?
Yes.
Approach, please.
You may continue.
Showing you Exhibit 249. Right here. What do we see here?
The double doors that were the entrance to his bedroom.
Were those the doors we saw pictures of earlier that had locks on them?
Yes. Yes.
this is the place, this bedroom here. A lot of secrets went on behind those closed doors, didn't it?
Yes. Yes.
A lot of violence?
Jackson has an answer.
Well, I would say 4 instances of violence total.
Okay. Some violence
Yes.
and some sex.
Yes.
Lots of sex. Right?
Yes, lots.
This doorway here. On this side of it. People know what was going on outside those doors?
I don't think so.
It was a dirty little secret you and Travis shared, wasn't it?
Jackson meeting.
Sustained.
It's a secret life going on behind those doors, wasn't there?
Jackson meeting.
Sustained.
Was there a secret life going on behind those doors?
Yes, there was.
A life that only you and Travis knew about until June 4th, 2008. Is that correct?
Well, I think other girls may have known with Travis in that room, but as far as between him and I, yes.
Even after his death, those secrets. Because this bedroom is also where you viewed him masturbating to an image of a child, correct?
Jackson meeting.
Of what?
That's correct.
When you were arrested and you were questioned about this. Well, let me back up. After June 4th, did you still have an interest in what went on behind these doors, keeping what went on behind these doors a secret?
The extent of it, yes, I did.
When you were arrested and you spoke to Detective Flores, did you still have the same desire to keep those secrets?
About when I walked in on him, yes, I made a promise.
About everything that happened behind those doors.
No, I told him a little bit that we had engaged in sexual activity, but I didn't want to go into detail, and I didn't want people to know the extent of that, but I thought it would be silly to deny it because I went to my bishop already about it.
My question was, if you did tell him, it's if you wanted to tell him about what went on behind those closed doors.
No, I didn't want anyone to know about. Everyone was saying he was a virgin. That's completely the opposite.
Sustained.
Why not?
I didn't want to throw mud on him at that point, or, I mean, this was a time where people were remembering the good things about him, and I didn't want to take away from that by sharing certain things that I knew. I wanted to just share the good things that I remembered also.
Your plan was to keep the secrets that went on behind these closed doors and take them to your grave, wasn't it?
Jackson meeting.
Sustained.
Was that your plan? What was your plan, to take these secrets to your grave?
Jackson gave the scope. She wasn't asked about any plans or anything for her grave.
Oh, girls, let me answer.
My plan was to never talk about the scope of those things. I didn't want to throw him under the bus.
So getting back to my question then, and we've talked about your plans for suicide and things, it was your plan to simply not talk about those things and keep those secrets and take them to your grave. Is that right?
Objection made.
Sustained.
You didn't want to talk about these things, right?
That's right.
You wanted to die before you told these secrets. Is that correct?
Objection made.
Sustained.
Would you rather have killed yourself than tell all the things that you've had to tell throughout the course of this trial?
Objection made.
Overruled.
At that time and for years that followed, yes.
You wanted to keep those secrets.
Objection made. Yes, and answer.
I haven't finished my question.
Continue.
Was keeping those secrets more important to you than your own life?
Objection, yes, and answer.
Overruled.
At that time, yes, it was. I didn't value my life much.
You didn't what?
I didn't value my life much. I wanted, well, I mean, eternal life, yes, but I wanted to be dead.
And in the same regard, you really didn't want to have to come out and tell all of us all these secrets. Is that correct?
Objection made. Irrelevance.
Sustained.
Was it a desire of yours to come forward, sit down in this witness chair in front of the cameras on national TV and air all this dirty laundry?
No, that was probably in the top 3 of my biggest fears.
You wanted to keep them a secret. Is that accurate?
Objection made.
Sustained.
What was your goal? We talked about your goal throughout this process. Your goals of deception, your goals of not telling Detective Flores, your goals of lying. Was it your goal to keep these secrets?
Yes, it was a goal of mine.
Your Honor, I have no other questions.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take the evening recess. Tomorrow morning, there's some matters that we need to address outside your presence. So I'm going to ask that you return at 1 p.m. 1 p.m. tomorrow. Please remember the admonition. You are excused. Have a nice evening. Please be seated. Ms. Grace, you may step down. All right, counsel. I just received some additional questions from the jurors. It looks like we have probably 100 questions. So I'm going to ask that Mr. Nurmi, Ms. Wilmot, you arrive tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Ms. Arias will be here. I'll give you an opportunity to review these questions. Mr. Martinez, can you be here by 11?
I can, but if there's going to be a court proceeding involving anything like this, I would ask that the next of kin also be included if the defendant is present involving these issues here.
Well, I wasn't going to have a court proceeding. I was going to allow defense counsel to review the questions with their client in the back, then I was going to give you a chance to review them at 11 o'clock, then we would go on the record around 11:30, discuss objections.
The only thing I ask is that I be given the same amount of time, since I do have this obligation for the next of kin to probably discuss some of these things with them. So I would ask for the same amount of time, perhaps 45 minutes for each side.
Can you be here at 9:30 tomorrow morning?
Yeah, that's.
My concern is that you believe that you would need a substantial period of time to review these. So if you are here at 9:30, you could have from 9:30 until 10:30, and then I'll give the state from 10:30 until 11:30, and then I'll hear objections. Will that work?
It will for me, thank you.
Otherwise, we'll do it the opposite, and we'll allow
Well, we have the jury coming in at
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock. That would only, based on that time frame, would only leave a half hour to deal with objections of 100 questions. That seems like it won't be sufficient. So,
Well, we'll take whatever time we need, and if the jury's here at 1 o'clock and we're not ready for them, then we'll deal with it at that time. All right? So 9:30, unless you want to come earlier.
well, we could.
Mr. Martinez, you're here tomorrow morning on another case.
Whatever time you want me here, I'll be here, and just let them know. So.
Yeah, I mean, we can, one side can have from 9 to 10 and another 10 to 11. We'll be here at 9.
Okay, 9 o'clock,
You're at 10 then.
and then you're here at 10.
Thank you.
Okay, that'll give us an hour. All right, thank you.